Well, thank you everyone for joining. This is our third webinar on cybersecurity and just kind of an update. I'm here once again with Eric Llewellyn from Hivelocity. Um, my name's Eric, and I'm from Cloud Linux. I'm an account manager, and Eric is a networking god over at Hivelocity. So we're going to
Not
talk
so
about a
much
few.
networking, more senior sysadmin, but yeah.
There you go. Sorry, I've had networking problems and he's helped me. And it was very useful. So we're going to talk about a few things that are exciting and new in cybersecurity and kind of lead on from there. So Eric, I'll let you get started.
Yeah. Well, it's great to be back, and I have some exciting news. Hivelocity was recently acquired by a company called Colohouse. They have an excellent team and portfolio of services, which will all continue under the Hivelocity brand moving forward. And with this, you can expect to see a lot of new developments on the horizon for us, such as new data center locations available for co-location, dedicated, and our VPS product line. You can expect enhancements to our current offerings and new offerings, such as our VMware private cloud provider. This is pretty neat because you can have all the flexibility and management of ESXi without having the overhead of managing bare metal machines. And one really important thing that I want to stress is that the teams from both organizations share the same culture and attitude towards ensuring that client satisfaction is the top priority. The excellent support and customer service you're accustomed to at Hivelocity will not change. We will just be able to expand that support and customer service to a wider range of locations and services for our customers. With the vast resources and talent from combining both of our organizations, we're going to have a huge increase in our capabilities, and we are thrilled to have that increase benefit all our customers. It's going to be a great year for Hivelocity, and it's only going to get better for both us and our clients.
Well, thank you, Eric. I believe it's my turn to talk to you about the power of passkeys. I'm sure you've seen them on many favorite websites. I'm going to throw into the chat here. We have a little web list of all the sites that do offer passkeys. Passkeys kind of work like your SSH key does, but for your login to different websites. So popular websites, I'm sure you've already seen, have started to support these. If you use a password manager, you can store these passkeys inside your password manager and have them synced across all your devices. We've been very big fans of BitWarden here. I also use 1Password. Both of these support these out of the box, and it really is just a great way to really lock down your login. Instead of having a username and some sort of guessable password string, you have this very complex passkey that will let you in. And the process is superior to even two-factor authentication, and is just very easy if you have some sort of centralized password vault to kind of keep those between your devices. Overall, let me share that link in our chat. It really is just not something to stray away from. Take a few minutes and set up the ones you can, and it's a great way of hardening your logins to popular websites that people like to fish, and then you can use that login across everywhere. See, is
It's
there
also more
anything else?
convenient.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, like when they work, it'll pop up and ask if you want to use your passkey, and you just jump right into the session. You don't have to fumble with your phone or your two-factor device if you have a separate one altogether. It just pretty miraculously just works. Kind of like your SSH keys have been working for a long time. This will work the same sort of way with just about any website on the list here. I pasted in the chat. And so the big one item we want to talk about is XZ. I brought up, of course, everyone loves XKCD, and we kind of get reminded that XZ is one of these little projects like this right here that no one had been maintaining, or someone had been maintaining thanklessly, and then they stepped away from the project. We kind of put the pretty much all of Linux at risk for it. Do you want to dig into the backstory about that, Mr. Llewellyn?
Oh, absolutely. Let's get into the lore. So, this is a really novel vulnerability that's come out because the attack surface is just massive. It's crazy. The implication that this would have if the before we even get into a lot of the detail, we have to say that we don't know who was behind this. We have no idea if it was a team or a single person. The username was, I believe, Giatan, but we're just going to refer to Giatan as an entity because that's the only real accurate way we can describe it. But as I was saying before, if the realizations of this entity were the goals were succeeded, right? They had gotten what they wanted. We don't know exactly what the scope of the damage could be. It could be, billions of dollars. It could be like medical issues. It could have probably destroyed a few crypto exchanges, and depending on how they have their services set up, but the damage it could have done really just can't be overstated. And getting more into how this happened, we have a repository, a open source piece of software called XZ and
And what
this
does
was
that do?
maintained.
Just to remind everyone.
Oh yeah, so XZ is just a file format for a compression algorithm known as libzma, and it's one of those things that a lot of different programs and services in Linux use as a shared library, which kind of ties into how this got to SSH. And it's essentially just like you could think of it as another alternative to like 7-zip or tar, like tarballs or RAR archives. So it's another one of those. And one of the things that make this interesting is that instead of targeting, say, like executives or engineers at a company, the entity we're talking about, the bad actor, targeted an open source maintainer and essentially pressured him into providing more access to the person that was making good commits for a while, because this Giatan account was active for about 2 years, making legitimate commits and actually contributing to open source software, all as a cover, a means to get access to I'm assuming any type of library that has a shared library with OpenSSH, so they could do this, they could perform this exploit. And an interesting thing throughout the timeline here is that you have a lot of fake users that popped up in the mailing list for this project. And they were essentially saying things like, well, man, these features are great that Giatan wrote. It's a shame this project isn't moving faster. These features could be implemented. It's sad to see a repository like this. The maintainer isn't doing enough. They made a bunch of fake accounts, made types of messages like that, and pressured the maintainer to where Giatan eventually did get the access that he wanted. And once he got that access, well, he got busy. He started making some changes. He created a tests folder and had a couple of binary files in there. And to preface the next part of this discussion, the technical implementation here is extremely sophisticated, extremely complex, and was done by an extremely capable and knowledgeable group of people. This is not like a script kiddie thing. This is potentially a nation state or large collaborative group type thing.
And this
And
took years, right, to get the
oh yeah,
access and to start, wearing the original developer down. It's quite a
this is like
persistent threat.
exactly. Yeah, this is like a whole plot. Like this is a plot from the beginning where whoever did this had the idea and then they just started making good commits. It's kind of like if I offer to clean your house for free and I did that for a few months and then I just started stealing stuff, right? So that's kind of like an analogy, a simple analogy here for what went on in the in this project. And the one of the things that makes it so clear that these people were extremely competent is that in a lot of hacks and a lot of, like, let's say a dark place marketplace, one familiar individual is Ross Ulbricht, who got caught because when he was initially promoting the Silk Road, he attached his personal email on a forum. And, what I'm saying is that there's a lot of bad actors or hackers that get caught due to operational security mishaps. And with this Giatan entity, none of that occurred. They were always using a VPN, no personal metadata, no Twitter, nothing associated with any of like the Giatan user or any of the other users was found. And what I'm trying to say is that they were very careful and they didn't leave any trail. We have no idea who it is. That's why I've been saying entity the whole time. I can't even, anything else beyond that would just be pure speculation. So back to the technical implementation of this, essentially how it worked is that the exploit was not present in any of the XZUtil source code. It was like if you scrolled through all the C and the object files, you wouldn't actually find the vulnerability in there. What they did is they had Giatan created a test folder and had two, funnily enough, compressed with XZ binary files in there that had the payload. And the interesting thing is that in the build tool for this program, or the build script, more accurate, they took these files. And if you imagine a file as a continuous sequence of bytes, right, from A to Z, what this did is it took one snippet, skipped a few blocks, took another snippet, skipped a few blocks from these binary files, and then it created a new actual file which had the malicious payload. And when it went through this whole process, that malicious payload was present in the libzma.5.6.0.so shared library file that SSHD uses. So what this did is it linked the attacker's ED448, which is an elliptic curve private public key pair, public key into SSH. And whenever someone with that private key tried to connect to SSH, it would allow them in. And this is really impressive because it's an exploit that would have been present on every LTS server if it went further, that no one else would be able to take advantage of. It's only this group or entity that has it. And that's how there's a lot of other technical bits that I don't have the time to fully explain. And to be frank, I'm not a security engineer, right? So I don't fully understand. But you would have to really, they still don't know exactly how it works because we don't actually have any source code on the malware itself. What we have is like a couple messy binary files and part of the system that kind of injected the attacker's public key and a few other things, but we don't have like a clean layup of everything that transpired in the repo. But one of the really important things in all of this is how this got discovered. There is a principal software engineer at Microsoft by the name of Andreas Frund. And this guy he's pretty much a hero because he found something that had such a great impact and immediately let everyone else know. And he's almost like a Jedi, really. He saw all these different bits of information. There were vol grind errors in Postgres with the unstable branch of Debian he was on. And then he saw a lot of CPU time on SSHD when he was benchmarking Postgres. And
like
he essentially
benchmarks were taking too long.
Yeah, exactly. It was only a tiny amount. He was like, hey, this is taking my SSH connection is taking 50 milliseconds too long. And he reached out and said, I sense a disturbance in the force. And he went through all these different little tiny details and dug deeper into the libzma source code and found out, hey, there's a backdoor. It's a huge deal. And he immediately alerted everyone on the mailing lists. And that's why we know about it. And that's why this did not reach LTS, which is really critical. And, we would all like to think that someone would have found this and figured it out eventually, but that's not a guarantee. So we really do owe some gratitude to this individual for, bringing light to the world that there's a huge backdoor. I mean, if it made it to LTS, that would harm our precious Penguin, and then it would be the year of the Windows Server. So, this is so yeah.
In this oddly situation, we're thanking a Microsoft developer for. Yeah. That good testing there, and also like your benchmarks are slow. Go find out why, and
Yeah,
being that sort of diligent. I mean, this got into a lot of the early builds of what was it, Debian, and I want to think maybe even
it was Fedora
Fedora.
4, yeah, Fedora
Yeah,
40, I think.
I mean this was lined up to get towards an ELS build. I mean, it probably would have been a few years, but it would have been there for pretty much every system that had SSH. And thank goodness it was caught. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a really exciting week. So let's talk about something else that's coming up. I'm sure you've heard about the end of life. We've got two big projects with big end of life dates coming up here. And in researching this, I found a really neat tool that I wanted to share with everyone. It's called endoflife.date. I'm going to throw a link in the chat here. This is a great way to find just any technology projects end of life date. I mean, I know go back to the primary source and verify, but it's a really handy way of finding out, what versions of pieces of software are end of life. They even have like Amazon Kindles and stuff in there, so it's a great tool. I'm sure probably at the bottom the Zune is in there, but anyhow, that's the only thing I could think of was the so there's two big end of lives coming up, the PHP 7 end of life, which I think just happened, and of course the enterprise software end of life, with the CentOS 7 ending, and then a lot of people needing to do upgrades. There are different ways of getting up to date. My company also sells ELS packages if you need to stay on those older systems, so those are also an opportunity. But you're not going to get security patches, and so whatever you can to get any sort of update or to make a plan to get into a secure state as soon as possible. You got 17 days or so, so that's coming up really quick with this version 7 end of life, and for a lot of people they're moving to 8 or to version 9, which is still very fresh but very quick releases here. There are some options of using the Elevate toolkit to hop forward from 7 to 8. If you have a pretty generic server, that works really well. If you spend a lot of time customizing, like I have, maybe not as well. But it's a viable way of doing that. The other way is just to redeploy. If you have a good DevOps deployment, it's pretty easy just to grab a newer version and redeploy using that as well. Um, let's move on to our next topic, which I can't believe I scheduled myself twice. We're going to talk a little bit about AI here next, but malware is being generated all the time by artificial intelligence, and people are using vulnerability reports just to generate new types of malware. And one of my roles is to sell Imunify 360. It's a great malware protection suite. It will keep your server safe using our 6-layer approach. We have a web application firewall, proactive defense, a wonderful malware scanner, and we can tell, we can scan on demand, we can scan individual files, databases, cron tabs, and we can also stop PHP processes as based on their behavior. So if somebody, generates or jiggles a existing piece of malware using, one of these large language models, we can still check it by its behavior, see that it's, doing a bad actor sort of thing, sending out a lot of spam for new Rolexes or something like that, and keep your system safe. So check out Imunify 360. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help you out with it. It's my favorite product we work on, and it's really just exciting to keep people safe. So moving over to Mr. Llewellyn again, we talk about data centers, AI, and of course all electricity.
Yeah, so big changes in this area where it comes to data centers and AI. And real quick to backtrack on what Eric Ellis was saying, I wouldn't use I personally would not have a cPanel server without Imunify. It really is a huge tool that just it removes stress from managing any type of cPanel server because it'll just handle all of that stuff for you instead of having to run Maldet scans or run ClamAV scans. It's like it's worth the money. It's not even that much to pay for. So highly recommend. But moving on to data centers and AI, so there's like 8,000 data centers around the world. About a third are in the US. And the huge change we're going to see and why AI is relevant in this change is because all of these AI large language models, they are not primarily using CPUs, they're using GPUs. And GPU powered racks require more power, occupy more space than and generate more heat than CPU based racks. So one of the huge things is that we all know that OpenAI exists. We all know that Claude exists. A lot of these others like Google's AI. But the thing is that a lot of people, a lot of organizations are going to want to run their own large language learning models because when it comes to OpenAI and especially building products around them, well, did I say OpenAI? I meant large language models in general. When it comes to building products around them, the privacy concern is actually quite large, right? Because people, I mean, many of you might have seen the recent Apple AI unveiling. A lot of people are uncomfortable with the idea of having all of their data essentially flow through OpenAI, and that's like a custodian of a lot of extremely sensitive topics depending on the product. So one of the things that'll take place is a lot of organizations are going to want to buy all of their own GPUs and run their own AI based workloads for privacy concerns. And that means that we're going to have a lot more data centers that are purpose built with the idea of AI in mind. And that means that these data centers, the ones that currently exist, will probably have to be retrofitted or upgraded to accommodate these power needs because when you think about it, if you're building a PC, for example, what is the component that determines your PSU? It's your GPU. If you're using an integrated GPU on the processor, you could probably get away with like a 400 watt power supply. If you're using dual SLI, you probably need a 1,000 watt plus PSU. So the same goes for servers. And the average amount of kilowatts that a AI oriented GPU based workload rack consumes is 50 kilowatts, which is a lot more than our average of 7 kilowatts with CPU based workloads. So this means that the new data center that'll be built will have to essentially require at least 3 to 5 times the power. That means that they're going to have to be built different. They're going to have to be built You're going to have additional cooling because if you have 3 times the power, you have near 3 times the heat. So the cooling infrastructure has to be better, and liquid cooling is going to become more common as this goes on. And that liquid cooling is going to require more complex installations and overhead where it comes to making sure liquid doesn't damage anything.
I
And
mean, the mineral oil data center is kind of a viable thing now, with all
especially
this
when it
extra
comes to
heat.
mining. Yeah.
Right.
And that's like it's a thing you see all the time in like high performance computing where they just have like boards sunk and like a large vat of, almost like it kind of looks like a Bacta tank, but full of computer hardware instead of Luke Skywalker. And, of course, the thing that makes that doable is that mineral oil is not conductive, unlike water. But the really another huge part of all of this is that the network requirements for rack to rack connections are going to completely change, completely be flipped on its head. You thought that 40 gig was a lot, 100 gig was a lot. With technologies that NVIDIA is spearheading, like InfiniBand and AWS's Elastic Fabric Adapter, we're talking terabits of data in between racks because all of these GPUs and all of these systems are essentially one distributed tool, right? That is the backend for a huge, like OpenAI, essentially. They're running on like all of Azure, and it's just every rack is like one small part of a larger system. So they need to have really, really fast communication in between the racks. So there's going to be a
And
lot of different developments when it comes to how we build data centers and how we move AI workloads into current data centers.
And I'm hearing more and more about AI sovereignty. So people want to have these large language models, and of course, I'm an American thinking in English, but there's a French concern that they want to have a large language model that preserves the French language and culture and be able to be used in French. And of course, every other nationality is in the same sort of place to either build in a secure place or on-prem in their own country to have AI sovereignty with their language models, and not just necessarily use a translation layer, but to be able to compute in their own language using their own technology. So it really is just going to I mean, I think 3x is a bit conservative. I think it's going to get even larger than that. That's wonderful. Overall, we'd like to thank you for joining us for our third one of these about security updates that have happened in, I don't know, I guess it's been about 6 months since we've done the last one of these. But they're always a lot of fun, and to kind of do perspective on this and look at some of the things we've lived with and some of the new exciting things coming out with security and in the data center and web hosting spaces. Thank you everyone for attending. Y'all have a great day.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It's a pleasure to be here.